The Valori Empire had stood for 12,000 years. It stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, covering more stars than any human could count in a lifetime. At the heart of this empire sat Queen Salith Vara, a being so old that she had watched civilizations rise from nothing and crumble to dust. Her body was made of something like crystal and flesh mixed together, beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Her mind could touch billions of her people at once through what they called the neural lattice, a web of thought that connected every Valori across the stars. She had ruled for 3,000 years. She had seen wars that burned entire worlds. She had made peace with enemies who had sworn to destroy her. Nothing had ever truly frightened her until now. The flagship Ascendant Grace was dying around her. Fire and smoke filled corridors that had once gleamed like polished jewels. The ship had been the pride of the Valori fleet, a vessel so large that smaller ships could dock inside it like fish swimming into the mouth of a whale. Now it drifted in the darkness of space, its engines dead, its weapons silent, its crew scattered or slain. The Kethver had come for her. They had planned this attack for centuries, waiting with the patience of insects for the perfect moment to strike. The Kethver were an old enemy, a species of warriors bred for nothing but conquest. They looked like nightmares given flesh, with bodies covered in hard shells and faces full of sharp parts that clicked and scraped when they moved. They had no art, no music, no love. They had only war, and they had finally found a way to kill a queen. The attack had come during what should have been a simple journey between star systems. Kethver ships had appeared from nowhere, using technology the Valori had never seen before. They jammed all communications. They disabled the fleet's weapons with strange energy pulses. And then they boarded the Ascendant Grace with one purpose: to reach the throne room and end the life of Queen Salith Vara. The Royal Guard had fought with everything they had. Each of the Queen's personal protectors was worth 100 ordinary soldiers. They were ancient warriors, trained for millennia, armed with weapons that could crack mountains. They threw themselves at the Kethver without hesitation, and for a time it seemed like they might hold, but the Kethver kept coming. Wave after wave of clicking, screeching warriors poured through the breached hull. They did not fear death. They did not retreat. They simply advanced, climbing over the bodies of their fallen, until the last of the Royal Guard lay still on the blood-soaked floor. Queen Salith Vara had tried to use her powers. The neural lattice gave her abilities that lesser beings would call magic. She could crush minds with a thought. She could stop hearts with a whisper. But the Kethver had prepared for this too. Their first attack had targeted the crystalline matrices that amplified her psychic abilities. Without them, she was like a singer who had lost her voice. She could feel her powers flickering inside her, but she could not make them work. For the first time in 3,000 years, she was alone in her own mind. The billions of voices that usually hummed in the background of her thoughts had gone silent. It was like going deaf and blind at the same time. She had never known such terrible quiet. She lay in the wreckage of her throne room, her beautiful crystalline body cracked and leaking fluid that glowed faintly in the darkness. One of her legs was trapped beneath a fallen pillar. She had tried to free herself, but her strength was gone. All she could do was wait for the Kethver to find her. She could hear them coming now. Heavy footsteps echoing through ruined corridors. The clicking of mandibles. The scrape of plasma blades being drawn from sheaths. They were close. Perhaps a minute away. Perhaps less. This was how it would end then. 12,000 years of empire. 3,000 years of her reign, and it would all collapse because of one perfect attack. Without her, the neural lattice would fail. Billions of Valori across the galaxy would be suddenly cut off from each other, their minds left empty and confused. Some would go mad. Some would simply stop functioning. The empire would fall in a single day. and the Kethver would sweep across the stars like a plague. She closed her eyes and tried to accept what was coming. She had lived longer than most beings in the galaxy. She had done great things and terrible things. Perhaps it was time for the universe to move on without her. Then she heard something that made no sense. Gunfire, but not the sharp crack of Valori weapons or the hissing burn of Kethver plasma. This was something rougher, simpler. An explosive projectile weapon. The kind of primitive tool that only one species in the Empire still used. Humans. The sound grew closer. She heard shouting in a language she recognized but rarely bothered to learn. She heard the screams of dying Kethver. She heard footsteps, lighter and faster than the insects, running toward her. A figure burst through the broken doorway of the throne room. It was small compared to her guards, soft and fragile-looking, dressed in the simple armor of a Terran auxiliary soldier. Blood covered its face. One of its arms hung at a bad angle. It was breathing hard, and its eyes darted around the room until they found her. The human stared at her for a long moment. She saw surprise in its face, then recognition, and something she could not name. "Oh," the human said. "That's not good." She almost laughed. Here she was, ancient and powerful, the ruler of an empire that spanned galaxies. And this tiny creature looked at her the way one might look at a broken vehicle on the side of a road. "Human," she said, and her voice came out weak and strange without the amplification of her matrices. "You should flee. The Kethver will not spare you for being lesser." The human checked the weapon in its hands. It did something with the mechanism, looked at a small display, and made a sound of displeasure. 32 rounds, it muttered. Then it looked back at her. "How many of them are coming?" "Hundreds," she said. "Perhaps thousands. This ship carries an invasion force." The human nodded slowly. It did not run. It did not scream. It simply walked to the doorway and looked out into the corridor, then turned back to face her. "Yeah," it said. "I'm not great at fleeing." And it took position at the door. Weapon raised, waiting for the enemy to come. Queen Selithvara, who had seen wonders and horrors beyond counting, found herself staring at this small, doomed creature with something she had not felt in centuries: curiosity. Sergeant Marcus Cole had never planned to die for an alien queen. He had never planned to die for anyone, really. He had planned to serve his 8 years in the Terran Auxiliary, collect his pay, and go home to a small farm on the outskirts of New Denver where his mother still grew tomatoes the old-fashioned way. But plans, as his father used to say, were just wishes that hadn't met reality yet. The Valari had found Earth 40 years ago. Marcus had been a child when the first ships appeared in the sky, huge and beautiful and terrifying. Humanity had expected invasion. What they got instead was an offer. The Valori Empire needed soldiers. Not the elite warriors that guarded their queens and fought their important battles, but the common troops who did the dirty work. The ones who cleared buildings and held positions and died in the places that mattered but would never be remembered. Humans, with their short lives and their strange toughness and their willingness to fight for causes they barely understood, were perfect for this role. Earth's governments had agreed to the deal because they had no choice. The galaxy was full of things that wanted to kill them, and humanity was small and weak and alone. The Valori offered protection, technology, and a place at the table. All they asked in return was blood. Marcus had signed up at 18. He was 26 now, which made him an old man by auxiliary standards. Most human soldiers died within their first 3 years of service. The Valari sent them to the worst places, the most dangerous missions. They were expendable in a way that the long-lived aliens could never be. He had fought on frozen moons where the air itself tried to kill him. He had cleared tunnels on worlds where the enemy could see in the dark and he could not. He had held positions for days without sleep, without food, without hope, simply because someone had told him to hold and no one had told him to stop. He had watched friends die. So many friends. He had stopped learning their names after the 3rd year, and now he was here, on the flagship of the Valori Empire, standing between an alien queen and certain death. With 32 bullets and no plan at all, the attack on the Ascendant Grace had caught everyone by surprise. Marcus and his unit had been stationed in the cargo hold, far from anything important. They were there to guard supplies, a job so boring that most of them had been asleep when the first explosion shook the ship. The Kethver breach had killed half of them instantly. A wall of fire and metal had swept through the hold, and Marcus had only survived because he had gotten up to use the bathroom. When he stumbled back into the main area, there was nothing left but smoke and screaming and the clicking sounds of enemy soldiers pouring through the holes in the hull. He had grabbed his rifle and run. Not toward the fight, not away from it, just into the maintenance tunnels that ran through the ship like veins. He had no plan except to keep moving, to find other survivors, to figure out what was happening. He never found other survivors. What he found instead was a path through the chaos, a route that took him higher and higher into the ship until he stumbled through a broken doorway and found himself staring at the most powerful being in 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. She looked broken. That was his first thought. The Valori were supposed to be perfect, eternal, beyond harm. But the queen lay in the wreckage of her throne room like a shattered statue, her strange crystalline body cracked and leaking, her eyes full of something that looked terribly like fear. She told him to run. She called him lesser, which should have made him angry but somehow didn't. She was probably right. What was he compared to her? His whole life was barely a blink of her eye. His whole species was barely a footnote in the history of her empire. But Marcus Cole had never been good at doing what he was told. He looked at the queen, and he saw someone who needed help. It didn't matter that she was alien. It didn't matter that her kind had used his kind as cannon fodder for 40 years. It didn't matter that she would probably forget his name 5 minutes after he died. She was in trouble, and he was here. And he could still fight. So he took his position at the door and waited. The first Kethver came around the corner 30 seconds later. It was huge, nearly twice his height, its body covered in armor that looked like it had grown from its own shell. It carried a plasma blade that hummed with deadly energy. Marcus shot it in the face. 3 rounds, quick and precise, right through the gap between its mandibles where the armor was thin. The creature fell backward, dead before it hit the ground. 2 more came behind it. He killed them 2. Then 5. Then 10. Then too many to count. He fell into a rhythm he had learned on a dozen battlefields. Shoot, move, reload. Use the doorway as a choke point. Make them come to you one at a time. Don't think about how many there are. Don't think about the ammunition counter dropping. Don't think about anything except the next target. Behind him, he heard the queen say something. A question, maybe. He didn't have time to listen. The Kethver were learning. They started using covering fire, forcing him to duck behind pillars while others advanced. He had to fall back, give up the doorway, find new positions in the ruined throne room. His rifle clicked empty. He switched to his pistol. A Kethver blade caught his arm, slicing through the armor and the flesh beneath. He screamed and shot the creature in the throat. Another one grabbed him from behind. He twisted, broke its grip, and drove his combat knife into the soft joint where its leg met its body. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only the fight. The endless, impossible fight. When the first wave finally pulled back to regroup, Marcus found himself on his knees, bleeding from wounds he couldn't count, surrounded by Kethver bodies. His pistol was empty. His knife was buried in the last creature he had killed. The queen was staring at him. Her strange purple eyes were wide, and her mouth was open like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Marcus laughed. "It hurt. Still here," he said. "How about that?" He pulled the knife free, wiped it on his leg, and started looking for weapons among the dead. The next wave would come soon. He needed to be ready. The second wave came an hour later. The third wave came 2 hours after that. By the fourth wave, Marcus had stopped counting time altogether. The throne room had become a killing ground. Bodies lay everywhere, piled so high in some places that they formed walls of their own. The floor was slick with blood and other fluids that Marcus tried not to think about. The air smelled like burning metal, and Death Marcus had run out of human ammunition long ago. Now he fought with weapons taken from the dead. HFY plasma blades were heavy and awkward in his hands, designed for creatures with different joints and different strength. But they worked. They cut through armor and flesh and bone, and that was all that mattered. He had learned things about the HFY in these long hours. He had learned that their armor was weakest at the joints, where the plates had to move against each other. He had learned that they could not turn their heads very far, which meant attacking from the side was safer than attacking from the front. He had learned that they made a certain clicking sound before they charged, a war cry that gave him just enough warning to prepare. Most importantly, he had learned that they could die. They were not immortal. They were not unstoppable. They were just soldiers like him, and soldiers could be killed. The Queen watched everything from where she lay trapped beneath the pillar. Her powers had not returned. She was helpless, reduced to a witness of her own rescue. Marcus could feel her eyes on him during the quiet moments between attacks, studying him like he was some strange creature she had never seen before. During one of these moments, while he was bandaging a wound on his leg with strips torn from a dead HFY uniform, she finally spoke. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus looked up. His face was covered in blood, some of it his own and some of it not. One of his eyes had swollen shut from a blow he barely remembered taking. His hands shook with exhaustion. "Doing what?" he asked. "Fighting. Dying." She paused, and her voice became softer. For me, Marcus thought about the question. It deserved a real answer, but he was too tired for philosophy. "Because you need help," he said simply. "And I'm here. That is not a reason. I am nothing to you. My people have treated your people as tools to be used and discarded. We have sent thousands of humans to their deaths without a second thought. You owe me nothing. You owe my empire nothing." Marcus finished tying the bandage and tested his leg. It hurt, but it held his weight. That was enough. "Maybe," he said. "But that's not really the point, is it?" "Then what is the point?" He limped over to where she lay and sat down with his back against the pillow that trapped her. He was so tired. His whole body felt like it was made of broken glass and old pain. "When I was a kid," he said, "my dad told me something. He said that the universe doesn't care about anyone. Stars burn out, planets die, whole species come and go, and none of it matters to the universe. It's all just stuff happening." The Queen listened. For a being who had lived for 3,000 years, she had very little experience with being lectured by someone who would be dead of old age before she finished her morning routine. "But here's the thing," Marcus continued. "We care. Humans, I mean. Maybe your people too, I don't know. But we care about things even when we know the universe doesn't. We love people even though they're going to die. We fight for causes even though we're going to lose. We help strangers even though nobody's keeping score." He turned his head to look at her. In the dim emergency lighting of the ruined throne room, her crystalline skin still glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped in glass. "My dad called it the human superpower," Marcus said. "The ability to care about things that don't make sense to care about." The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she said, Your species has only been part of the galaxy for 40 years. You live such brief lives. How can you possibly understand what matters and what does not?" Marcus smiled, and his cracked lips split and bled. "Maybe that's why we care so much," he said. "We don't have time to waste on figuring out what deserves it." A sound came from the corridor. Clicking mandibles. Scraping feet. The Kethver were regrouping again. Marcus pushed himself to his feet. Everything hurt. He could feel his body failing, systems shutting down one by one. He had lost too much blood. He had broken too many bones. Even his stubborn human biology couldn't keep this up forever. But not yet. He wasn't done yet. He picked up the plasma blade he had been using. It felt heavier than before, or maybe he was just weaker. "You should rest," the Queen said. "You cannot fight forever." "No," Marcus agreed. "But I can fight right now. And right now is all I've got." He walked to the doorway and took his position. The fifth wave came. Marcus met them with everything he had left. He moved like a man possessed, like a machine built for violence, like something that had forgotten how to stop. The Kethver fell before him, and he did not slow down, did not hesitate, did not think about the blood pouring from his wounds or the darkness creeping into the edges of his vision. Behind him, the Queen felt something strange. Her powers were still gone, crushed by the attack on her matrices. But even without them, she could sense emotions if they were strong enough. And what she sensed from the human was unlike anything she had ever felt before. He was terrified. He was in agony. He wanted nothing more than to stop, to rest, to let the darkness take him. But beneath all of that, there was something else. Something that burned like a small sun in the center of his being. Defiance. Pure, absolute, unreasonable defiance. The universe said he should die, and he simply refused to listen. The Queen had lived for 3,000 years. She had commanded armies. She had shaped the fate of billions. But she had never, in all that time, seen anything quite like this. And she began to understand why the Valori had been wrong about humans. They were not lesser. They were not expendable. They were something else entirely. By the 6th hour, Marcus could barely stand. The Kethver had stopped their attacks. They were still out there, clicking and scraping in the darkness of the corridors, but they had pulled back to regroup. Perhaps they were waiting for reinforcements. Perhaps they were simply tired of dying. Either way, Marcus was grateful for the pause. He had collapsed against a broken column near the Queen. His armor was gone, torn away piece by piece during the fighting until all that remained was his torn undersuit, soaked dark with blood. He could not feel his left arm anymore. His right leg had stopped working properly about an hour ago. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps that hurt more than they helped. He was dying. He knew this with the calm certainty of a man who had seen death many times. The wounds were too many. The blood loss was too great. Even if the Kethver never came back, he would be dead within the hour. But the Kethver would come back. And when they did, he would fight them again. Because that was all he had left. The Queen had managed to drag herself closer to him during the last pause in fighting. Her beautiful crystalline body scraped against the floor, leaving trails of glowing fluid behind her. One of her arms was broken, bent at an angle that looked wrong even for her alien form. But she had made it to his side, and now her hand rested on his shoulder. Her touch was cool and smooth, like polished glass. It felt strange, but not unpleasant. "You have done more than anyone could ask," she said. Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. "More than I deserve. Please, rest now." Marcus wanted to laugh, but he didn't have the strength. Instead, he just shook his head slightly. "Can't," he said. "They'll come back. Then let them come. You have bought time." Perhaps help will arrive. Perhaps it will not. Either way, you have done enough. There's no such thing as enough, Marcus said. Not until it's over. The Queen was silent for a moment. Then she asked, "Are all humans like you?" Marcus thought about the question. He thought about his squad, all dead now in the cargo hold. He thought about his father, who had worked himself to exhaustion every day of his life to keep a small farm running. He thought about his mother, who had refused to leave Earth even when the Valori offered passage to better worlds. "No," he said finally. "Some are worse. Some are better. We're all different, just like any species, I guess. But this thing you have, this stubbornness, this refusal to accept what is inevitable, is that common among your kind?" Marcus considered this. "Yeah," he said. "I think maybe it is. We're not strong like your people. We're not smart like some of the other species. We don't live long. But we're stubborn. We hold on to things even when we shouldn't. Even when it hurts." The Queen's hand tightened slightly on his shoulder. "I have lived for 3,000 years, she said. "I have ruled an empire that spans galaxies. And I do not think I have ever truly understood courage until today." "It's not courage," Marcus said. "Courage is when you're not afraid. I'm terrified. I've been terrified since the first Kethver came through that door. Then, what would you call it?" Marcus thought about this for a long moment. The pain made thinking hard, and the answer kept slipping away from him. "Spite," he said finally. "I think it might just be spite. The universe wants me to give up, and I'm too angry to do it." The Queen made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Spite," she repeated. "You are dying out of spite. Humans are petty like that," Marcus said. "It's one of our better qualities." They sat in silence for a while. The clicking of the Kethver grew louder. They were getting ready for another push. Marcus could hear them organizing, moving into position. He tried to stand. His leg gave out, and he fell back against the column. "Stay down," the Queen said. "Please." "Can't," Marcus said again. He tried once more, using the column to pull himself up. His vision swam with black spots. His heart was beating too fast, trying to pump blood that was no longer there, but he made it to his feet. He stood there, swaying, barely conscious, holding a plasma blade in his one working hand. "Why?" the Queen asked, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost like desperation. "Why will you not stop?" Marcus looked back at her. His one good eye focused on her face, on the tears that were forming in her crystalline eyes. "Because I'm still alive," he said. "And as long as I'm alive, I can fight. That's the deal. That's the only deal that matters." He turned back to the doorway. The Kethver came. There were more of them this time. Many more. They had given up on careful tactics and were simply going to overwhelm him with numbers. They poured through the doorway like a flood, clicking and screeching, blades raised. Marcus met them. He killed the first one. He killed the second. The third one got past his guard and stabbed him in the chest. But he kept fighting, kept swinging, kept refusing to fall. The fourth one took his arm. The fifth one took his leg. He fell to his knees, still fighting, still screaming his defiance. The sixth one raised its blade for the killing blow. And then Queen Salith Vara, ruler of the Valori Empire, did something she had not done in 2,000 years. She screamed, not with her voice, with her mind, with everything she had left, with power she didn't know she still possessed. She screamed, and the scream tore through the damaged lattice connections that still flickered in her crystalline structure. It ripped across the stars, carried by fragments of the neural network that had been shattered but not destroyed. Across the galaxy, every Valori with even a trace of connection to the lattice felt it. They felt their queen's anguish. They felt her rage. And they felt something else. An image, a memory, A feeling, a mortal creature, standing alone against the dark. Not because he would win, because it was right. The scream echoed through space and time, and everything changed. The HFY warrior froze with its blade still raised above Marcus's broken body. Something had changed. Something in the air, in the very fabric of space around the crippled flagship. The other HFY felt it too. They stopped their advance, antennae twitching, suddenly uncertain. The Queen's scream had done something impossible. It had traveled through the shattered remnants of the neural lattice, jumping from fragment to fragment like lightning leaping between clouds. It had reached the scattered Valori fleet, the ships that had been disabled and defeated in the initial attack. It had touched every Valori mind within 100 light years, and had carried a message. Not words, but something deeper. An image of a human soldier, small and fragile and dying, standing against impossible odds. The feeling of his defiance. The burning light of his courage. The Valori had always believed themselves superior. They lived for millennia. They could touch minds across the stars. They had built an empire that would last forever. And they had looked at humans as lesser beings, useful tools, but nothing more. Now they understood how wrong they had been. The first Valori warship powered back to life 12 minutes after the Queen's scream. Its crew had been scattered, its systems damaged, its captain wounded. But they heard their Queen. They felt what she felt. And they came. More ships followed. Engines that had been declared dead roared back to life. Weapons that had been disabled were repaired through sheer desperate will. Across the void, the broken fleet reformed itself and turned toward the ascendant grace. They came with fury beyond anything the HFY had expected. They came not as soldiers following orders, but as warriors who had finally understood what they were fighting for. The HFY boarding parties tried to hold their ground. They had planned this attack for centuries. They had prepared for every possibility. But they had not prepared for this. They had not prepared for an empire to rise from defeat with the memory of a human's courage. Burning in their minds, the battle was short and brutal. The Valori Marines cut through the HFY like fire through dry grass. They showed no mercy, offered no quarter. Their Queen had called to them and they answered. When they finally breached the throne room, they found something that stopped them in their tracks. Their Queen, ancient and powerful and terrible, sat on the blood-soaked floor cradling the broken body of a human sergeant. Her crystalline tears fell onto his still face, each one glowing faintly with her life essence. She was speaking to him in a voice too quiet for the Marines to hear. "You cannot die," she was saying. "I will not allow it. Do you hear me, Marcus Cole? I forbid you to die." The lead Marine stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty," he said, "we need to get you to the medical bay." "Your wounds, his wounds first," the Queen said, and her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of rule. "Save him. I do not care what it costs. I do not care what laws of biology must be broken. Save him." The Marine hesitated. Humans were fragile creatures. Their bodies did not respond well to Valori medical technology. And this one was so badly damaged that it seemed impossible for him to still be alive at all. "Your Majesty, his injuries are beyond, and find a way," the Queen said. "He has earned it." They took Marcus to the medical bay. The best Valori healers worked on him for 3 days, using techniques that had never been tried on a human body. They rebuilt his bones with crystalline lattice. They replaced his lost blood with fluid that carried more oxygen than any natural substance. They wove neural pathways through his brain that connected him, in some small way, to the lattice that joined all Valori. He should have died 100 times during those 3 days. His heart stopped, and they restarted it. His brain shut down, and they brought it back. His body rejected the alien modifications, and they forced it to accept them. On the fourth day, he opened his eyes. The Queen was there, sitting beside his bed. She had refused to leave. Her own wounds had been treated, but she would not rest until he woke. "Welcome back," she said softly. Marcus looked down at his hands. They looked the same, but they felt different, stronger. He could see better than before, hear more clearly, think more quickly. Something fundamental had changed inside him. "What did you do to me?" he asked. "We saved you," the Queen said, "in the only way we could. You are not entirely human anymore, but you are not Valori either. You are something new, something that has never existed before." Marcus sat up slowly. His body responded better than he expected. The pain was gone, replaced by a strange sense of wholeness. "How long will I live?" "We do not know. Perhaps centuries. Perhaps longer. The modifications we made were unprecedented. We will have to see what you become." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing this. His whole life, he had expected to die young. Most auxiliary soldiers did. Now he might live longer than the oldest human in history. Why? He asked finally. "Why go to all this trouble for me?" The Queen reached out and touched his hand. Her crystalline fingers intertwined with his, and he could feel a faint echo of her thoughts through the new pathways in his mind. She was grateful. She was amazed. She was changed in some way that she did not fully understand herself. "Because you showed me something I had forgotten," she said. "Something my people had forgotten. We thought strength was about power and longevity and the ability to crush our enemies. But true strength is something else. It is the choice to stand firm when everything tells you to fall. It is caring about things that do not make sense to care about." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "You taught us what courage really means, Marcus Cole, and for that, we owe you more than we can ever repay." 3 months later, at a ceremony broadcast across the entire empire, Queen Salith Vara announced that the Terran Auxiliary was being disbanded. In its place, humanity was offered full citizenship in the Valori Empire, not as servants or soldiers, but as partners. As equals, Marcus stood beside the Queen as she made the announcement. He was different now, taller and stronger, with faint crystalline patterns visible beneath his skin. But his eyes were still human, still carrying that strange light that had burned so bright in the darkness of the throne room. When the ceremony was over, Earth's ambassador approached him with tears in her eyes. "Why us?" she asked. "We are so young, so small, so brief." Marcus looked at the Queen, then back at the ambassador. "Because we burn brightly," he said. "Because we care about things even when the universe tells us not to. Because when everything whispers that we're insignificant, we simply refuse to listen." He smiled, and for a moment, the ambassador could see the young soldier he had been, standing alone against impossible odds, refusing to give up. "That's what makes us human," he said. And apparently, that's exactly what the galaxy needed. In the years that followed, humanity took its place among the stars. They were never the strongest species, or the oldest, or the wisest. But they were something else. They were the ones who stood firm when others fled. They were the ones who cared about strangers. They were the ones who faced the darkness with nothing but spite and stubbornness and the absolute refusal to give up Dot and the galaxy. Slowly but surely, learn to be grateful for them. The Queen lived for another 10,000 years. And in all that time, she never forgot the night a mortal warrior chose to die for her. She kept a small statue of him in her private chambers, a reminder of the lesson he had taught her. The plaque beneath it read, "Because she needed help." And I was there. It was, she often thought, the most human thing anyone had ever said, and it was exactly what the universe needed to hear.